Well, thank you very much. I'm Libby Doggett, as he said, and we're delighted that you all are our audience today. Also really happy to have such a strong panel. We're going to look at preschool, really not just preschool, but early education. We're going to talk mostly about preschool, but truthfully, this learning begins the moment or even before a child is born, and we want to be sure we cover that whole 5 years before children enter kindergarten, because children are entering kindergarten behind, and there's a lot we could do in those first 5 years to make a huge difference. School districts are starting to step up and do a lot, but we have a lot more to do. I say that 20 years ago, Texas was really leading in early childhood education. We had so much going on, but in the last 20 years, as we have made small steps, other states have made giant leaps forward. And so now Texas is really having to make up for all the things that we haven't done. So many of our children live in poverty. We have preschool for at-risk children, for 4-year-olds, but it's poor quality. It's rated a 4 out of a 10 on a national scale. Our child care system is severely underfunded, so employers can't find the workforce they need. So we have lots of problems, and we have experts here to talk about it. So we have a national perspective, state perspective, and then 2 local perspectives. One person who's in the school district, and then one person who's outside. So we'll hear really about the whole span. I've given them each about 5 minutes, and I'll be a firm timekeeper on this to kind of lay the landscape, first at the national level, going down to the local level. Then we'll have a round of questions and answers, a conversation, and then we will open it up to y'all at the end. So be thinking about all your good questions, because we do want to hear from you. So I'm going to start off with Bruce Atchison, and I'll let him introduce himself, but I think you all have in your app all the bios.
Does an introduction count against my 5 minutes?
Yes.
All right, then I'm Bruce Atchison from Education Commission of the States. I'll leave it at that. Go?
Go.
So 5 minutes isn't very long, and I'm going to cover a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to give you a lot of data, and therefore I'm going to refer to my notes quite a bit, but hopefully you'll be able to absorb some of this, and I'll make some points. And I'm going to cover pre-K and quality. I'm going to cover the birth to 8 continuum, and I'm going to touch on alignment. But before I start, I just want to point out, and Libby will remember this, that 20 years ago we defined early childhood education as birth to 5. And yes, that's the focus here, but there's been a paradigm shift across this country the last 10, 12, 15 years, and early education is now defined as birth to 8-year-olds. So it goes through 3rd grade. So that's based on brain development that's happened, research that's happened, how we know children learn. So I just want you to keep that in mind. So pre-K and quality. Once childcare and pre-K was considered strictly a workforce issue, but what we've seen over the last 10, 15 years is more and more state leaders, governors, legislators, state boards of education, really see that access to high quality, and I'll emphasize that high quality piece, as a long-term economic investment. So that's kind of the precedent. And then some of the data. In the 2016-17 budget year, the fiscal year, 30 states increased pre-K funding. Of those 30 states, 18 had Republican governors, 12 had Democratic governors. So it's definitely a bipartisan issue that we've seen a lot of momentum across this country. In that same budget year, 5 states did not fund pre-K. And when I say they didn't fund it, I'm talking about it wasn't embedded in their school funding formula like it is in Texas, and they were putting no state general fund money into pre-K. That didn't mean they didn't have some pre-K, because they still offered Head Start and private pre-K, but no state general fund money. Only 18 states have something in code or statute specific to the transition from pre-K into the K-12 system. So we're kind of falling behind on that one, and Texas is not one of those states. We know that students in high-quality pre-K programs oftentimes enter lower quality half-day kindergarten programs. where endorsements aren't required in early childhood, kindergarten teachers aren't required to have X amount of courses in child development, maybe it's a huge class size. So you can go from a really high quality pre-K program into a low quality kindergarten, first, second grade programs, and you're gonna probably lose some ground of what you gained in those early years. Texas, as Libby mentioned, I want to put this out there again, you only meet 4 of the 10 quality standards as identified by the National Institute of Early Education Research. Last year they came up with 10 new quality standards and you only meet 4 of those as well. Some of the issues that you don't meet, that you're not doing well on, have to do with staff-child ratios, class sizes, there's no limit. Your teaching assistants aren't required to have a degree, any kind of a CDA, and then there's some issues around meals and screening, et cetera. Texas has about 2,500,000 kids under the age of 6. 60% of your parents are in the workforce, and you serve approximately 11% of those working families that would qualify for child care assistance. One other point, only 13 states plus DC require districts to offer full-day kindergarten. Texas is not one of those. So alignment. There's a disconnect between the birth to 5 and the K-3 system, right? I mean, historically it's been that birth to 5 space. Then kids would enter the K-12 system. Oftentimes principals, administrators were like, yeah, you're daycare, we're the education entity. Let me tell you, education does not begin in kindergarten. Education begins at birth. And that birth to 5 continuum are key, but the birth to 3rd grade continuum are additionally key. 71% of your kids in this state are not reading proficiently by the end of 3rd grade. You don't solve that problem. See, I'm going off on a tangent. I got away from my notes. You don't solve that problem by starting with literacy training and math coaching in kindergarten. It starts much earlier than that. Alignment, back to alignment. So I just want to real quickly address 2 different kinds of alignment. There's alignment at the district or the school level, and then we're talking about the standards that the teachers have to teach to, right, your state standards. We're talking about the curricula, what they teach. Then you're talking about instruction, how they teach it, and you're talking about assessment of how we're measuring how well the kids are doing. Typically, the birth to 5, pre-K space, and the K-3 space at the local level aren't aligning all of those issues, and it's a big component of alignment. The other piece of alignment that I want to address quickly is the governance piece. Texas is a good example of a system that does not have a good early childhood governance structure. You have early childhood programs in 4 different departments. Those typically are good people implementing good programs, but there is no governance structure to guide policy, to guide fiscal decisions, to define what needs to be in rules and regs and so forth. Then finally, so in Texas, I would say early childhood is a non-system. Don't mean that negatively, but you have a lot of work to do in my opinion. Finally, on the birth to 8 continuum, there's 13,588 school districts in this country, about 90,000 elementary school students. You guys have over 1,000 districts. We're seeing a lot of those districts starting to pay attention to a P3 approach, a pre-K through 3rd grade approach, putting more emphasis. Instead of the principal putting their lowest performing teachers into kindergarten, they're starting to put their higher performing teachers into kindergarten, realizing that, you know, if you want your kids reading proficiently by 3rd grade, it starts there. Am I done? So just a couple of other quick closing comments. 13 states required kindergarten teachers to have an early education license, and only 4 states require elementary school principals to have preparation in early language and literacy. Only 1 state, Illinois, requires principals to actually have credit hours in child development. And then I will end with that if you can get a high quality pre-K program in place, and the districts and the SEA, the state education agency, are working closely with the districts in the K-3 space, you begin to see this alignment and this continuum of high quality, seamless services, and that's what we want to achieve in the early education world if you want your kids math and reading proficient by 3rd grade.
Thank you, Bruce. And we'll
welcome.
let you come back and talk
All right,
more about
I will.
other states. So we're fortunate to have Cody Summerville, who's here from the Texas Education Agency. He's part of the early childhood team, and he's one of my former interns, which I'm very proud of. So Cody, tell us a little bit about how the state is doing on pre-K and what y'all are doing.
Certainly. So thank you so much for having me today. Like Libby said, I'm in the Early Childhood Education Division at TEA as a program specialist. And just to kind of give a overview of what is happening in early childhood in the space that TEA kind of oversees. The first and foremost is state-funded pre-K. We do offer state-funded pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds who meet certain eligibility requirements, and the state funds that at a half day. We do see, though, that the majority of our districts do offer a full-day program. So they're finding either local dollars or they're finding philanthropic dollars or using partnerships with childcare or Head Start to provide a full-day pre-K. Currently, we serve about 225,000 3 and 4-year-old children in state-funded pre-K. And there are children who do get to go to state-funded or not state-funded pre-K, but go to pre-K at the school district, and schools are able to charge tuition to non-eligible students. Right now, we're serving about 64% of our eligible 4-year-olds. We're only serving about 10% of our eligible 3-year-olds. Part of that is districts are not required to serve 3-year-olds like they're required to serve 4-year-olds. And 3-year-olds is a whole different ballgame from 4-year-olds. As our division director says, they are NPR, non-potty reliable, which adds a lot of additional challenges for administrators and for teaching staff. So to build off of pre-K, we're doing a lot also in the primary space in grades K1 and 2 to increase quality and support teachers that are on the ground. A few of the things that the agency is doing is we're in the process right now of creating a new teacher certification that is pre-K to 3rd grade. And it is I believe it's supposed to come out in 2020 is the goal. Right now we're in the process of developing the certification exam for that. To address some gaps in administrators' capacity to support early learning, the new principal certification will have in the certification exam several ways to gauge principals' competencies in an early childhood context. So I believe it's about 25% of the questions on the exam will be written in an early childhood context, and some of the reporting out of exams will include a breakdown based off of early childhood, elementary, middle school, and high school, so that school districts, when principals are coming in, can see where a principal's strong suit is and hopefully matching their strengths to ultimately the setting and the school that they're overseeing. We are building out resources every day at the agency to support both teachers and administrators who are working in the early childhood space. We are offering right now technical assistance cohorts to I think it's about 60 districts in total, and they're placed into 4 different cohorts that are each focusing on a different aspect of early childhood. We have one that's focusing on classroom environments, one that's focusing on enrollment and partnerships around pre-K, and then we have 2 groups that are focusing on pre-K and K alignment because that was such a need identified by the field. And we will be working with those districts. We started this week. Tomorrow I have my first kickoff with my group. And each month we provide a webinar on a subtopic related to that overarching topic. We're doing one-on-one technical assistance calls as well as facilitating some virtual PLCs to increase coordination and sharing of practices. And the other thing we're doing is we have a whole person dedicated at the agency to support partnerships. So there are many districts that have a partnership planning grant that is funded from the Texas Workforce Commission and then on to TEA. And we're working with those districts to identify childcare partners that would make good and strong partners where they can serve students at the child care center and count them as a student of the district. And then they also, if they are a child who receives child care subsidy, can pull down subsidy dollars as well. So that's kind of a overview of a lot of the work that we're doing. We're also gearing up to apply for a new federal grant. The race is on to the deadline, and it's really going to help us do a lot of systems building work that Bruce kind of alluded to, that we need a lot of some of the governance structures in place, and this grant is going to help fund a good amount of that work.
So you can see that our Texas Education Agency is really doing a lot of work and making up for lost time. A team that used to be one person is now a full-fledged team. You can get technical assistance from the Texas Education Agency. They're working on improving the quality of the four-year-old program, and they're going to have to do it in collaboration with school districts because the ratios is a problem. If you have 20 kids and one teacher, you have crowd control. You don't have that individual instruction that children need. So, and you don't have that full day. So districts are having to make up for some of that, but they're able to get some help from the TEA. And then Cody mentioned the 3-year-olds. We're leaving a lot of money for 3-year-olds on the table. And so districts that aren't looking at pulling down that 3-year-old money and providing services are just leaving that money. We in Austin are starting to use it. I know they are in Fort Worth and other places as well. And then it's really exciting to have the new certification, because that will mean that you'll have teachers that you won't have to spend a lot of time training because they'll already come in with an early childhood background. So that's great. We really appreciate all you all are doing. So I'm going to turn to Nichole next, who's at Manor Independent School District here in Travis County. And she's going to talk about what they're doing as a small district in their early childhood.
Yes,
So Nichole,
thank you for having me. Nichole Aguirre, Director of Early Childhood in Manor ISD. Some of the things that we're doing in Manor is we have built out our full-day pre-K4 program as well as 5 pre-K3 units across our district. The problem that we run into as a public school district is funding. So previously we offered pre-K3 full day and pre-K4 full day, but due to sustainability and cost, we eliminated our pre-K3 program, and by doing that, our numbers of enrollment dropped from about 800 pre-K students to about 500 pre-K students. So we know that hurt our community in terms of support, and that midday pickup, it just wasn't a viable solution for our families. And so our push right now is to find creative solutions to bring in additional dollars to not only support our pre-K4 program, but also to build out a pre-K3 program in our school district.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you can see school districts are struggling to make up for the fact that we don't have funding for full day, and they're paying the price.
Yep, definitely.
Right. Kara, I'll let you introduce yourself and tell them a little bit about what you're doing.
I'm Kara Waddell with a nonprofit in Fort Worth, Texas called Child Care Associates. It began, I know you. Began about 50 years ago, primarily serving the child care need. Families began to change, women began to work, there began to be more single parent families, and our community kind of rallied and said, gosh, we're going to need to come up with childcare solutions. And over time that began to kind of change. Later that began when Head Start and Early Head Start was developed nationally, we picked up those pieces. And so we've run as many as 50 or 60 childcare centers in our community. And today we're much more narrowly focused on Head Start, Early Head Start, and then the Workforce Commission in Texas has the Child Care Development Funds, which helps support the quality of child care and helps working parents actually pay for child care. And so we manage that as well. So we're about a 90 million nonprofit today, which is large in the early education space. That's one unique thing about Texas, is that because there's a lot of local control of the child care dollars and the others, that the local community really has a really powerful sway in what's happening in the birth to 5 space especially.
Great. So you can see that you all need to, if you don't already know, your Workforce Commission. You need to go over there and ask them, what are they doing? How do they want to partner? They have quality dollars. How are they using those quality dollars? Because we've really got to put this system together by working with workforce and with school districts and then with the private sector. So thank you all. So I'm going to start actually with Nichole and Kara with a question myself, unless you all have some questions of each other.
No, we have your question.
Okay. Well, do you have a question of any in the panel?
No?
Yeah.
Can I follow up on the governance question? So one challenge, I had lived in Oregon before and was the child care administrator in that state, and that state had struggled with what are we going to do? Are we going to have an early education agency, or are we going to leave the different funding pots in different agencies and make them work together? And so our state decided to move the deck chairs and create that. Texas has decided to have the different agencies and come up with a way for them to work together. So my question is going to be, what are the thoughts and how we get how have other states approached getting their different agencies to work together, reducing some of the bureaucracy, and having kind of one state plan for children birth to 5 in Texas?
Want me to take it?
Is that
I
for
think
Bruce?
that's you, Bruce.
I think we're actually working on a 50-state scan right now at Education Commission of the States to figure out just that question, and that'll come out in December. But my gut response is it's a leadership issue, that if that starts with the governor, and the governor has his or her cabinet in place, and the cabinet, he gets the buy-in from the cabinet that yes, we need we need to take these programs. I dealt with this when I worked for a governor in Colorado. We defined 7 departments with 27 different programs, and the governor was behind this, and what we ended up doing is bringing programs away from departments, right, which isn't always a real popular thing, and putting them under one office of early childhood. And it worked. Now, they still don't have the ultimate governance authority. They didn't create a governance body, so I don't think it was done exactly as it could have been, as opposed to a state like Massachusetts. Sorry to mention Massachusetts, and I'll put Alabama in there as well, because Alabama are the only 2 states that actually have state departments of early education. So they have a secretary of early education who works closely with their K-12 chief or commissioner and their higher ed, chief or commissioner. So we have 2 states that actually have departments. I could go on and forever about this, but I know Libby has lots of questions. So I would just say, Kara, I think it starts with leadership, and then you have to get that. It's a top-down, bottom-up approach, is what it has to be. The leadership, and then you need the people and the providers and the programs to agree that this makes sense in order to reduce inefficiencies, to increase efficiency, reduce bureaucracy, maybe creating a single point of entry so the ultimate beneficiary is the child and the families.
It's also a little disruptive when you move the deck chairs. And
Right.
the other advantage we have in Texas is the 4-year-old programs have been around a long time. Y'all have been providing 4-year-old pre-K for a long time, and it's pretty much integrated into the school system. So TEA has a major role, but the workforce does as well. But Cody, you have some
Well, I was
ideas
going to
about
say
this.
to the governance, and we are doing a few things with what we call the quad agencies. So one of our 4 primary state agencies that have a hand in early childhood would be the Texas Education Agency, the Department of Family and Protective Services, the Texas Workforce Commission, and the Health and Human Services Commission. And each of those commissioners are coming together and jointly funding a interagency deputy director for early childhood education, and that person essentially works for all 4 agencies, and their role is to help streamline policies and programs across the 4 agencies and make sure there's a lot of information sharing and everyone's up to date on what everyone else is doing so we can reduce some of our duplicative efforts.
Only encouragement might be too, since I'm supposed to be local voice today, is something like an early learning council can sometimes bring together urban and rural voices from across the state and not just have state agency leaders talking to each other, but bring in the voice of the people from localities as well. And I know that's the way, I think most states have some kind of early learning council that helps advises the state.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So let's go to your wish list. So Nichole and Kara, you have some education leaders out there that are going to be working next session. What's on your wish list? What do you want them to work for in early learning?
I'll let you go first.
For me, for thinking of birth to 5 and early education, I think there's two bookends from a policy standpoint that I'd always want to keep in mind. We've done a good job of talking about birth to 5. A lot of times people say early education, we think pre-K. And I think one of the challenges, I think it's 85% of Republicans nationwide, 87% of independents, 97% of Democrats are not just for pre-K, they're for birth to 5 quality early education that includes affordable childcare for working parents. And I think that that's a bookend that in all the different policy conversations across all the pieces is to remember the birth to 5 component and the base of support that we have. It really is a purple issue, and I know from a wish list standpoint for policymakers, knowing that and holding on to that there is no silver bullet program. Head Start proved that for the last 50 years. There is no, it's about putting the different, and I run a Head Start, an early Head Start program. There is no one single answer. It's about putting the pieces together at the community level. And the other bookend I would say are the professionals who work with young children. You know, fundamentally, I think we know, as those who care about education, that those who work with very young children are not any less important than those who work with slightly older children. But that pay differential, the challenges, even the professionalism in which they're treated is extremely different. And so thinking about that 0 to 5 educator and how it fits in, Texas is kind of unique in comparison to other states in that we actually pay our pre-K teachers roughly what we pay our elementary teachers. And that's not true in a lot of other states. They're just trying to get their pre-K teachers to the same pay level. Well, then we have the challenge of, well, when you start delivering with Cody's program out in TEA, out in the community where pre-K isn't just magically happening in school buildings, it's also happening in childcare programs and in Head Start and community centers across communities. Well, then all of a sudden you have a pay differential of $20,000, $30,000. And the kind of training that we require for infant teachers is less than what we require of nail technicians in Texas. And so fundamentally, there's so much to work on the professionalism of early educators, how we fund degrees for them, for higher ed in the room, the quality of that degree, and what it means in early education. We always say we want the family science degree for child development and the teacher preparatory program in education to get married and have a baby degree, and that's the degree that we want, is where they really are fundamentally grounded in child development and human resources and working with fragile children as well as literacy and language development. So on my wish list are just fundamentally knowing the quality of the professional and just remembering the 0 to 5 space as critical.
Cody has a comment.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Oh, okay. I have a comment. So if we want to do early childhood in the community, we know we want to do that. We hear that from the legislature that, you know, let's do some partnerships. What are the challenges? I mean, I see the challenges because our early childhood, our child care system is so poorly funded, and those standards are some of the lowest in the country, that to bring those up to the standard of our pre-K program, it's a huge lift.
Super hard.
How are you working on that?
So partnerships in our community, we have about 2,000 Head Start children, that's 3 and 4-year-olds, and so 2/3 of those now are paired up with school districts. So we're co-delivering pre-kindergarten and Head Start together. That's helping them not just lengthen the program day, but now to also really align those program pieces. Well, here's what's challenging. You walk in, every school district has a very fundamental different idea of what they'd like pre-kindergarten to look like. And because the state hasn't necessarily defined those things, I mean, we're trying the best we can to define quality and to work with them and to be flexible, but it's real challenging to be able to roll that out. I know I presented before the Fort Worth ISD School Board, and we're talking about our early childhood collaboratives. And Libby, I think those early childhood collaboratives are a really powerful place where you're bringing together your United Way agencies, your child care, your nonprofits and school districts, and have one table to start figuring out how are you going to define school readiness. What does that look like in the context of different programs? So presenting before the Fort Worth ISD School Board, they kind of stopped me midway and they said, well, can we just ask, like, how do we know that Head Start is high quality? And I kind of paused. I was new and turning around an agency that had struggled, frankly. And I kind of looked back at them and said, well, respectfully, how do you know you have high quality pre-K? I was like, Dr. Scribner didn't go to school to learn about what quality early childhood development. None of the school board members were from that. And I said, we have to define that together. We don't do that in an antagonistic way to prove which program's better. And I know locally in Fort Worth, one of the things that we've done is we now test about this year will be 600 classrooms that will be externally assessed using the same assessment tool. So it's measuring the quality of the teacher-child interaction. So whether it's a childcare classroom, an infant-toddler classroom, Head Start, early Head Start, or pre-kindergarten, those coaches that are working with those programs are all fundamentally using the same tool, coming together as a professional learning community, and we're beginning to define at the local level quality early education classroom by classroom, not program by program competitively. And we're seeing tremendous traction. People are surprised at the quality that childcare is bringing to the table at roughly equal levels to, and now I can answer the question for the school board about what the quality level is, because we've fundamentally measured them in the same way.
I want to come back to the coaching later, but I want Nichole to tell us. You have some leaders out here. What do you want them to bring home for early learning this next session?
Yeah, so from the public school standpoint, I would have to take it back to funding. When we look at the number of minutes that we're serving our students, so Texas requires or funds 180 minutes of pre-K instruction a day. Manor invests $1.4 million every school year to provide the extra 180 minutes to give our kids a full day for pre-K. And when you look at that for the full year, the state's requiring 32,000 minutes. I have to refer to my notes, but we provide up to 72,000 minutes of instruction, but we are investing that. And as a small district who relies on supports from local partnerships, from companies that surround our area, it is a burden that's placed on us, and in order to fix that, we need our state to help, fund the program for our students.
Great. So we've talked a lot about quality. We talked that Texas pre-K has low standards. We meet 4 of the near 10 benchmarks. We don't have class size. We don't have teacher-pupil ratios. Bruce, what have other states done to improve the quality? Because my feeling as an advocate, it was a lot harder to improve the quality than it was to expand the program.
A good question. I would say the majority of states have implemented some sort of a QRIS system, which is a quality rating and improvement system within their early childhood care and education field. That does not just apply to pre-K programs, that's childcare, pre-K into, starting at infancy. And the people that try and orchestrate this at the national level, they're called BUILD, they actually have standards that go into 3rd grade. So almost every state now, I don't believe Texas has a coordinated QRIS system right now, but we're seeing a small one. So we're seeing movement around the QRIS system. Another thing that we see states doing is every state receives a child care development block grant. I believe in Texas that goes through your workforce division. And those are the dollars that are subsidizing child care for the working poor, or their different standards, but it's mostly for the working poor. But every state has to put a minimum of their total appropriation of 4% into improving quality. And then there's definitions, like they have to put X amount into infant toddler, X amount into resource and referral. There are some restraints, but we're seeing a number of states that don't just put 4%, they actually put more like 7% or 10%. So the state, through their general fund, are adding to that quality enhancement pot. And then there's the whole P3 discussion too, Libby, which is we're seeing more and more states starting to pay attention to the fact that you can't have this disconnect and expect to have student success by the end of 3rd grade, that we have to do a better job of connecting the early childhood system, birth to 5, with the K-12 system, and we're seeing more and more states starting to take on more of a P3 approach, which encompasses quality.
Great. Well, I want to move on and let Cody tell us, what are you hearing from districts? What are they telling you at TEA now that you're offering technical assistance, you have this great team? What are they telling you they need?
So we visited all 20 education service centers in the spring to do some technical assistance presentations, and as part of those visits, we also did a survey of kind of what people are needing more assistance on, and at the top of the list was pre-KK alignment. Also looking at the quality of classrooms and mentoring and coaching of teachers. And so what we're trying to figure out at the agency is what can we do with the resources we have to turn around resources for districts related to those areas. And one thing that we released an initial version of last year was our high quality pre-kindergarten self-assessment tool, which is a program evaluation tool that's voluntary that districts can use, and it helps them identify the areas that they need to make quality improvements in. We are any day now going to release the early childhood program self-assessment. We've changed the name, and we'll have phase 2 of kindergarten. We'll have, phase 2 of pre-K, and we'll have phase 1 of kindergarten. Mm-hmm. So we're starting to build out the program evaluation tools that districts can use to assess their early childhood programs. Next year, we plan to come out with grade 1 and grade 2. And once again, these are completely voluntary tools. They don't submit anything to TEA. It's really a tool to help them identify where their strengths are and where there are opportunities to grow. And we're using this self-assessment tool to identify what we can do as far as the resources to then improve that quality. Because identifying where you need to grow and then finding the resources to grow are two different ball games. So we are rolling out more and more technical assistance. We do monthly webinars that anyone, regardless of who you are in the state, can join. And we do everything from data reporting and student progress monitoring to next month we're doing one on how do you support challenging behaviors in the classroom. So we're trying to do a wide range of things, both those compliance pieces that are necessary, but also districts are wanting to move beyond compliance. They're realizing the value of quality in early childhood, so they're really wanting to say, okay, this is what I have to do for compliance, but what should I be doing that's really quality, and what's that benchmark? And so we're doing everything we can every day. It seems like we come up with a new resource, whether that be a partnership guidebook, an enrollment toolkit, alignment across standards. We just released an alignment of the Texas Early Learning Guidelines, the Texas Pre-K Guidelines, and the Kinder through 2nd grade Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. So that way we can see the full continuum of learning from infancy up to 2nd grade.
So we have some great data people here, including E3 Alliance here in Austin that provides us amazing data. How are you all seeing data influence your work? I mean, Bruce, at the national level, how is data influencing the growth of alignment or pre-K or early education policy?
I think we're behind the times, Libby. You know, the majority of states are not doing a good job of integrating the data that we're collecting in the pre-K programs and birth to 5 programs into their state longitudinal data systems.
And do people have a joint, child care, home visiting, Head Start?
Some states, right,
integrated system?
In terms of like blending and braiding funding?
No, the data, that the data is in one place.
I don't know of any state that does that. I know that
so we're all behind the times.
There's a handful of states that have passed legislation where they, as soon as a child, and let's take an infant, you're a parent and you're concerned your child isn't talking yet, mama, dada, and the kid's 12 months old, that parent finds out about the local child find and takes the child to get assessed. Well, that's funded through state funding. As soon as a child enters any component of the state system, they are given a state student identifier, which most students don't receive until kindergarten. But there's a handful of states that have done this so that as soon as a parent accesses any state-funded program, they are given a student identifier, and that number sticks with them until they graduate from college through post-secondary. So that way the students
Have you seen
are.
that working in conservative states?
You have an example of a conservative?
Alabama have it?
Right, because that's part of the argument, Libby, is, the government is intruding into the lives of families. And, the states that have done this have done it in a very confidential way so that, that data isn't given out to the public with any sort of an association attached to it. Utah's done this, they're a conservative state. And it seems to be working, because that way the states can track when a student moves from this school to that school, or they cross a county line because the child care is more affordable over there. And the state can actually track what's happening with this child in terms of the data. Now, how they're utilizing that data to change their systems, I don't have any good concrete examples.
Okay, so I'm gonna let Cody, then you can go, Karen.
Okay.
So there's a few things we're doing at the state level to leverage the data that we have the authority to do. One resource that everyone needs to be aware of is TPEIR, T-P-E-I-R. It's the Texas Public Education Information Reports. And there is wonderful reports on pre-K and kindergarten, and you can get those by district, and in some cases you can get them even by school. And it provides a lot of really useful data. The other kind of thing that we're working on right now is we have a grant through EC DataWorks, or Early Childhood DataWorks, and we are building an early childhood data system. We're working with the Texas Workforce Commission to integrate some of our data and also create a public-facing analytic tool so that you can look at the needs in your communities, the types of providers that are there, the quality that is offered by those providers. I will say each agency collects information differently. The education agency, we obviously identify student-level data by student. Our Texas Workforce Commission, they identify it by the family, because the family's the one applying for the benefits, and it's not tagged to a child's name. So you can see that there are some issues. Even when we do have the authority to do some data sharing, the matching of the data can be very difficult.
Kara, how are you all using data?
So at the local level, one of the challenges that we found is that school districts don't even know where the early education programs are that aren't in their buildings. And so practically, we've gone to Buxton, which is a consumer data analytics firm, and just took all of our information on Head Start and Early Head Start, all of the information that we happen to have for childcare programs out in the community, and the public data set of pre-kindergarten, where the pre-kindergarten programs are. And very practically, we can search by school district, elementary school catchment area, city, county, and just begin to show people, like, well, maybe you don't need to put a pre-kindergarten program because there's 3 high-quality childcare programs right around the corner and a Head Start right down the street. Maybe you should partner with them instead of using public funds to build a new classroom or a new facility. So practically, I think at the community level, we've sort of been coming up with practical ways at the macro level, just where are these programs and who's serving who. In the context of conservative state, and how do you, quote, be able to show I would argue that it's about accountability. You would be able to know exactly whether I ran a good program or didn't run a good program if Head Start kids were given student identifiers. You'd be able to point right back and know how they're doing and track where they're going. And so from an accountability standpoint, I'd say it's a really great idea that we know where taxpayer dollars are going. And it can be done discreetly and doesn't need to be, no chips and wrists and crazy concepts like this. But we really need the data and information. And I know now at the local level, also the class tool, back to coaching.
Yeah, I don't know if they know what class is.
Class is a tool that measures the quality of teacher-child interaction. So high-stakes testing for children, very young children, most of us agree it's not a very good idea. And so you start thinking about, well, the adult who's in the classroom who's working with very young children, let's find out how well they're engaging the child with the use of the classroom, how they're working with them. I mean, that's a reasonable thing to begin to do. And so class is kind of the gold standard in the US for kind of measuring the quality of what's happening in an early education classroom. Now that we have that data locally, it's changed how philanthropy and how others are suddenly viewing childcare and Head Start, because they can see the data. They can see you went in that classroom and that teacher's performing at an equally high level as to someone who has a bachelor's degree and 10 years of teaching experience. And so for us to we fundamentally need the data and information. Even if it's not child data, we've been able to supplement that because we don't have it. We don't have a plan for the state as to how we track young children and begin to show those outcomes. We, at least at the community level, are having to put the pieces together in order to be accountable. I know some folks didn't love Head Start and Early Head Start in our community, and I said, well, do you want to give the money back? Or do you think we should just or do you want to hold me accountable? Do you want to see what we're doing and make sure that we're doing a better job? And I think that's the right attitude on data and information, is if you don't have it at the state level, at least get it at the local.
Okay, I'm going to give you each a last word before we open it up. And your last word is, what recommendations do you have for them regarding early learning in Texas? Who wants to go first? Okay, Nichole, you're on.
I just wanted to speak a little bit to what Kara said right before my last word, but in terms of using data to drive decisions, when you talk about K through 5, or I'd even say 3rd through 5th, it's easy to pull data from either their STAR test or those MOIs, BOIs, but when it comes to pre-K and kinder, you don't always have that standardized assessment that can give you the data that you need. And one thing that we're doing in Manor is our pre-K assessment was developed by E3 Alliance, and it's RSK, it's an authentic assessment, and instead of sitting children at a computer and saying, tell me this letter, tell me this sound, show me this shape, teachers are sitting in with their students while they're working, when they're actively engaged, to pull on what it is that they know, what it is that they're struggling with, and what can I do as a teacher, and what words can I give to parents to build their capacity in whatever skill it is that they're learning. So I kind of insert myself into that conversation when folks are talking about, why pre-K, why we need this funding, why are we making this huge investment. I always use data to back up, what I'm bringing to the table.
Fantastic. Do you want to give a recommendation on top of that?
I would
As
say,
a close?
yeah, my recommendation for that would be, in terms of looking at, do you have a high quality pre-K program? Just making sure that you're finding a viable, valid tool to use to assess, student growth in pre-K classrooms.
Great. Kara, what advice, what recommendation?
The benefit of having a coordinated state plan, of having a key strategic plan that aligns 4 different agencies is super helpful at the local level, because those funds trickle down to us and it's just a mess trying to make them work together and do that well. And so my encouragement would be, let's get some kind of coordinating council that can have local voice as well as state voice. Whether there's a need for some kind of governor's liaison or a person at a cabinet level to help make those work together. But in a state as big as Texas, I know Libby and I convened 20 cities, 20 of the largest cities in Texas and Fort Worth, and just shared best practices about what was happening. Those 20 cities alone represented over 700,000 children 0 to 4. That's a 0 to 4 child population bigger than 46 states. And so how money gets handed to those cities, that there is a coordinated state plan in a state as big as Texas, is really important. So that's what I put my chips on.
Okay. Cody.
I got an amen.
Cody.
Well, I just want to close by saying that we're excited at the Texas Education Agency about our increased capacity to support districts in the area of early childhood education, and we are more prepared than ever, I feel like, to meet their needs, and we're just excited about all the work that's to come our way.
So we have a great team, we have a great commissioner that value this, so now is the time to move. So Bruce.
I think I agree with everything that's been said, and I guess to me it's the gap analysis. Know what your data is, know where the greatest need is and what's going to make the biggest difference, and then work with your elected officials, be it state board, governor's office, legislators, to make sure, because there's a whole lot of elected officials that want to do something good in early education. Just make sure that what they are going to do is the right thing to do. Like there's a number of legislators in states that want to do a retention bill because we don't have kids reading proficiently by the end of 3rd grade, so let's just retain them. Well, take a look at Jeb Bush in Florida and what happened there. They did that. They were the first state to do it. And then 2 years later, they went back and reneged it because it's not cheap to retain a child. And if you're retaining every child that isn't reading proficiently in Texas, you're retaining 71% of your kids, so good luck with funding that. So just be strategic, have a plan in place. Quality matters, pay attention to quality. We haven't touched on birth to 3 that much, but that's another whole discussion. Parent engagement is another discussion. Looking at the whole child approach and not just an academic approach is another discussion for another day, but those would be my thoughts.
Great.
Great.
So we've thrown a lot at you. We've talked about a lot of things, and then Bruce has also pointed out all the things we haven't talked about. It's a complex field, and I feel like sometimes when you're at a school district or you're a reporter or you wanting to talk about early education, you don't know quite how to talk about it because it is so complex, because you have child care, Head Start in schools, and you have private and public, and and nonprofit childcare and for-profit childcare and a variety of things. But know that there are people that want to help and that we have a good system that with some more work could be one of the best in the country. So let's hear from what concerns you have. Yes. Can you stand up and tell us your name just so we'll, and where you're from? In the blue and white. Yes.
Hi, I'm Nina Kumar from Families in Power. My question is about the parent engagement and the demand side. So we talked a lot about the supply of high-quality early education. It sounds like a lot of parents who are eligible for benefits don't take advantage of that. Is that a supply issue? Can you address that? And, you know.
Okay, two of you can address it. Parent demand. Why are
On the child care
Okay.
side, I just want to make sure to clarify that I know in Fort Worth we serve about 10% of income eligible families for child care, and that's with the new funding increase. We just had the most miraculous child care funding increase that no one anticipated. And so after that, I know the mayor's office called me and said well, are we gonna, are we meeting the need now? I mean, are we getting closer? And I was like, no, I mean, we still have 9 out of 10 families who can't afford child care. And so it's been a rethinking for us at the local community level as to supply and demand. We need a greater supply and we need it out at an affordable price point. So we're convening our business community and beginning to talk about HR benefits in a new way. Millennials expect to receive family benefits. They will leave one job and go to another in order to get better family benefits. And so we're trying to tool up our business community to think about what are you offering your families, and we've even offered the backbone structure of the public funding for how we get public funding and pay for childcare that way. We've offered to run that for businesses. If you don't want to run it yourself, but you want to help offset the cost of childcare for your employees, we'll run it. We already send checks to these childcare providers, and we already know the quality of them. And so the quality of your child care programs in your community, there is a statewide quality rating and improvement system, right? Because Texas parents pay for the bulk of child care. Child care is not paid for by the state. Child care is paid for by hardworking parents. I think they estimate about 90% of child care costs are borne by Texan parents. And so Texan parents have no consumer guide. If they want to know what's a good child care program, now if you're a subsidy parent, you get a consumer guide, but an average parent in Texas doesn't really know. And so one of our challenges is gosh, we'd really love for the Texas rating system, Texas Rising Star, to be open and available to all licensed child care programs in Texas, because we think hardworking Texans deserve access to the consumer information about what's happening in those child care programs.
Cody's going to tell us a little bit about family demand
so
too,
we're
and then we'll
doing
go to you.
a good number of things at the agency. Our commissioner is very dedicated to what he calls family empowerment, and we are building out more and more resources every day to support parents' capacity to foster development and learning at home, because we know that learning doesn't just happen within the context of a school or a child care center, that it is happening all the time. And so we're really thinking about what are the resources that we can provide to families so that way they have the knowledge to support their child.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, question back there.
Yes. For Nichole, I think
Yeah.
most goes to you. So similar to what Mina had just asked, so for pre-K eligible families, the ones that are opting out, whether they're opting out to keep their kid at home or maybe they have another child care option, what are the specific strategies you guys use to either convert those parents back to coming to you guys, or is it out recruiting other families? What is that?
Yeah, so
Who's not in those seats?
Yeah.
Why aren't they there?
Why aren't they in those seats? So currently, we don't have, I guess it's a blessing, right? Because right now, all of our seats are full. Our parents are coming to our centers. 98% of the students enrolled in pre-K in our district they qualify either by language or by income. So we haven't really had a problem with filling seats, but what we do is we do community walks. We've gone to our local doctors in the area and they write a prescription for pre-K. Great idea from
that's cute.
Success by Six, United Way. And so we have efforts to recruit families. Manor is growing rapidly. We have new neighborhoods that are going up every day. And so as a district, we have this initiative we have open enrollment. You can come in and enroll your child anytime, any day of the week, and we can get you those supports that you need. As far as trying to find out why a parent would want to take their child from our pre-K program or why they wouldn't want them to start, I would always start by explaining the benefits of getting them in pre-K, and the sooner the better. We have their pre-K 3 program, which fills up almost the day that it opens, it's full. And so you know that there's clearly a need for a growth in pre-K and funding for pre-K so that we can add more of those pre-K units.
So Cody, why aren't we at 80% of 4-year-olds in pre-K?
Well, and the number's a little misleading because we have to think about all the different services that are out there. There's home visiting, there's Head Start, there's child care. So we are serving a good amount of our 4-year-olds between all of our programs. But we do know one of the challenges that families face with enrolling their child in state-funded pre-K is the half-day offering that many districts offer. Because if you're at work, how do you get your child to their next place of care, if that's child care? Many school districts do not offer transportation for 3 and 4-year-olds. They will not put them on a bus, and that's a local decision. But it definitely hinders some parents enrolling their child into state-funded pre-K. We are assisting school districts with an enrollment toolkit. It's out there on the Texas Gateway, and it includes outreach strategies, sample social media campaign messages, and innovative ideas like writing prescriptions with pediatricians and building local partnerships with organizations that already touch families to increase their knowledge and awareness about the availability of state-funded pre-K.
It's really dollars in your pocket, schools, if you can get every one of your 4-year-olds, and if you're doing 3-year-olds, as many as possible there. Susan, did you have a question?
Yeah, a comment for Nichole and a question for Cody. First of all, to Nichole, thank you, because we have 8 years of data that says that pre-K, a child who attends pre-K has 3 times the odds ratio to be ready for kindergarten, but especially those kids who are in full-day, low-ratio classrooms have the highest likelihood, and Manor converted all of their classrooms to full-day, low-ratio, so that was a huge bump throughout the region when they did that. Thanks. And for Cody now, that you all are integrating systems with Workforce Solutions and trying to make better data available, how are you going to help use that data for districts and the state to make better decisions about pre-K investments? Because that's exactly what Manor's doing.
So I know one thing in all of our strategic plan, in all of our project plans, we base our success off of data and the metrics that we can collect. So I and everyone at the agency is held accountable to certain metrics. And one of the things that our division is held accountable to is increasing enrollment in pre-K. And we have a lot of systems in place to analyze data throughout our different initiatives to make sure that we're going in the right way and change course if necessary.
Great. We do appreciate all the data you provide us, Susan. Other questions? Yes.
Is there any plan to sell the data like they did with the SpedX IEP analysis project?
Not to my awareness.
And I just have a quick comment to your point. Another issue that hasn't come up here is ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is really kind of a trickling down, and I haven't read the Texas plan. But if you look at the ESSA Act that came out of Congress, early care and education is woven through pretty much every one of those titles. So whether it's, and what this is doing is it's giving the local school districts and principals, if they understand it and are willing to move on it, it's really empowering them to use more of your Title I money to serve, pre-K kids, or your Title II dollars to do more collaborative professional development work with your K-3 and pre-K teachers, and Title IX certainly is. So anyway, the point is, I think local districts are going to have a lot more authority with their data and how they collect it and utilize it and report it back up to the state than they've ever had in the past, and they need to be thinking creatively about this and grasp the opportunity.
Libby, there is a backdoor way as well, which Cody and I have spoken about, that the state has an early childhood data system, and community-based organizations can, with parent permissions, enter the child's information, and they'll assign them a student identifier, and then you get a kindergarten report back, how they were doing at kindergarten ready. So for our Head Start program, all of our kids are now entered, and we'll be able to get just this year for the first time. It was really hard the first year. It's still real hard to get it done. It's a little bit wonky. But you're getting this information back, and now we're beginning to do it for all the child care programs. So you asked about the workforce solutions and the data side, that now we'll be able to, just at the local level, even though the state hasn't figured out how to integrate data, we'll at least be able to know the children that are receiving subsidy, did they show up as kindergarten ready as kids that were experiencing full day pre-kindergarten? And I think that's a really important question, because we're spending an awful lot of money on those kiddos as well, and I think we have a shared policy agenda. We want their parents to work if they need to work, but we also want their children to be ready for school, and that'll begin to answer that.
And we do that by giving, our pre-K students will take the same assessment all year, and then our kinder students take that assessment at the beginning of the year to see were they ready for
Right, within one school district.
Within one school district.
It's a lot harder when we have like 8 school districts. We have no idea how the kids are doing, and everybody uses different tools, so it becomes real challenging.
But it's a problem, sorry Libby, in our education system, in my opinion. It's like we have this attitude in the K-12 system, and to a degree in the early learning years, that we don't build upon where a child is when they go from kindergarten to first grade, or where they were in pre-K, and how the teacher is going to build on that in the kindergarten program. Rather, it's, all right, it's a new year, these are my new standards, I'm going to start where I need to start, paying little attention to the data.
Absolutely.
And particularly in that pre-K to K transition period, because the pre-K space and childcare space and Head Start space, you know, they're doing assessments, they are doing home visits, they know these kids, they know where they are and where they need to get to. And the majority of times that information does not get passed on to the school district or the kindergarten teacher. So we have to start building on where children enter the system and where they were the previous year, and do a better job of that.
One of the issues you may face, or you may hear when you go to the legislature, or if you're at the legislature, is that pre-K gains aren't sustained. And sometimes, if the program is not good quality, they're not sustained. But if the program is high quality, and then you follow up with high quality kindergarten, first and second grade, then they are sustained, and we now have data to show that. But it is a problem, because if a program is poor quality, the children aren't getting enough out of it to inoculate them for poor quality in the early grades. And there is documented evidence to show that we haven't tended to kindergarten, first and second grade. They haven't been as rigorous as they need to be. They've been based really haven't been based on how children learn. So children are spending way too much time seated doing worksheets rather than experiential or activity-based hands-on learning. So, you know, as you're improving your pre-K programs and looking down to your birth to 5 programs, we also want you to be looking forward at your kindergarten, first and second grades, because we know we have some work to do there.
And to that point, that's one of the reasons in our division we're really focused on building out this early childhood program self-assessment tool all the way up to second grade.
Right.
So that way quality isn't just synonymous with pre-K. I feel like in many ways we've renamed the grade level to high quality pre-K. And we need high quality kindergarten, high quality first grade, and high quality second grade. It's sort of like if you build a house with a really great foundation, but then your frame, you just use lousy materials, when it falls over at the end, it's not the foundation's fault. It's really what happened in between and after that foundation was laid.
Great. Any last questions? Great. So you all go forward and help us make sure that every 4-year-old has the option of a high quality program, that you start pulling down that 3-year-old money, and that you go work with the Workforce Commission to assure that the infants and toddlers are getting high quality programs, and we'll have a better state in the next few years. So thank you all very much. Thank you, panel.
Thank you.